Good evening, I'm Faye Kwan, and these are our top stories for tonight. Donald Trump nominates Kevin Warsh as the new chair of the U.S. Federal Reserve to replace Jerome Powell. And the U.S. president threatens tariffs against any country that supplies oil to Cuba. All that and more coming up on AWANI International. U.S. President Donald Trump has nominated former Fed Governor Kevin Warsh as the new chair of the Federal Reserve. Warsh will replace Jerome Powell, whose term as Fed chair expires in May. Warsh had served on the Fed's Board of Governors from 2006 to 2011 and has previously advised Trump on economic policy. He is seen as more open to lower interest rates, but is also viewed as one of the more cautious and less radical options under Trump's consideration. The appointment comes at a time of heightened tensions between the Fed and the White House. Earlier this month, Powell said federal prosecutors had opened a criminal investigation into comments he made about renovations to the Fed's headquarters, an inquiry he described as politically motivated. Trump has repeatedly criticized Jerome Powell over the past year, saying he has moved too slowly to cut interest rates. U.S. President Donald Trump is stepping up pressure on Cuba, threatening new tariffs on any country that continues to supply oil to the island. The move comes as Havana grapples with an energy crisis that has already left hospitals, homes, and businesses struggling to keep the lights on.
The announcement came via an executive order signed Thursday in Washington. It doesn't name specific countries or set tariff levels, but it signals Washington's intent to cut off fuel to Havana. Venezuela, once Cuba's main oil supplier, has halted shipments following a U.S. military operation that led to the capture of former President Nicolas Maduro, leaving the island's energy supply in crisis. Havana warned that Trump's latest move could cripple essential services and restrict daily life for ordinary Cubans, condemning the policy as coercive. The order would primarily put pressure on Mexico, a government that has acted as an oil lifeline for Cuba, even as Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum has sought to build a strong relationship with Trump.
Those are the headlines for tonight. More news coming up shortly after the break.
Kerjasama berterusan penting antara Kerajaan Negeri Sabah dan pemain industri tenaga bagi memastikan sektor itu terus menyumbang kepada pertumbuhan ekonomi negeri.
Samarahan bakal memiliki zon kawasan hijau yang luas dengan pengenalan Samarahan Park.
Daulat Tuanku.
U.S. President Donald Trump has warned that Britain's deepening business ties with China could be dangerous, as UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer defended a reset in relations with Beijing. Trump made the remarks in Washington as Starmer held extensive talks with Chinese President Xi Jinping, seeking stronger trade, investment, and market access for British companies. Despite that, Starmer said the UK's relationship with the US remains one of its closest, spanning defense, security, and intelligence. He described his meetings in Beijing as very warm, saying they delivered real progress, including agreements on visa-free travel and lowered tariffs on liquor. In Washington, however, Trump offered a sharp warning, saying it was very dangerous for Britain to get into business with Beijing without elaborating further. Starmer said that resetting ties with the world's second-largest economy was key to boosting growth at home, insisting Britain should not have to choose between the United States and China. The comments come as Western allies grapple with Trump's trade threats, including recent warnings of tariffs against countries that deepen economic ties with China. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump says Russian President Vladimir Putin has agreed to a pause in attacks on Kiev and other cities, citing extraordinarily cold weather. Trump did not specify when the pause would take effect. While Moscow has not confirmed the claim, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says he expects the Kremlin to honor its commitment.
Temperatures in Kyiv are forecast to plunge to as low as negative 24 degrees Celsius in the coming days. Russia has intensified strikes on Ukraine's energy infrastructure during the winter, as it has since the war began in 2022, leaving millions without electricity or essential heating. Following Trump's announcement, Ukraine has reportedly agreed to mirror Russia's move and temporarily halt attacks on Russian oil refineries. Last week, Russian, Ukrainian, and US negotiators met in the United Arab Emirates for the first trilateral talks since 2022. All sides described the discussions as constructive, but no concrete agreements have been announced so far.
Venezuela is opening its oil sector to privatization, reversing a core tenet of the socialist movement that has governed the country for more than 2 decades. Acting President Delcy Rodriguez signed the bill into law on Thursday, less than 2 hours after it was approved by the National Assembly.
The move comes less than a month after the seizure of former leader Nicolas Maduro in a U.S. military operation in Caracas. The new law opens the door to much-needed foreign investment as Venezuela seeks to revive an oil industry long hampered by mismanagement and sanctions. It gives private firms control over production and sales and making the royalties regime more flexible. Washington has already begun to ease economic sanctions on Venezuelan oil, measures first imposed under the first Trump administration. U.S. President Donald Trump, in a call with Rodriguez on Thursday, also announced he would be lifting restrictions on the nation's commercial airspace.
In other news, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz says Ukraine joining the European Union by 2027 is not realistic, stressing that accession is a long and complex process. The remarks directly contradict Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who said on Tuesday that Kyiv is aiming for EU membership by next year and is actively lobbying member states to support that timeline.
Merz said Ukraine must have the prospect of becoming a member of the EU, but like all candidates, it must meet the EU's Copenhagen criteria, a process that typically takes years. The criteria include stable democracy, rule of law, respect for human rights, a functioning market economy, and the ability to implement EU law. Ukraine received candidate status in 2022 after Russia's full-scale invasion, with official accession talks starting in 2024. But Hungary is blocking negotiating chapters, saying Ukraine's accession would come with security threats and economic risks, underscoring divisions within the EU.
Thailand's election race is taking shape ahead of the vote on February 8th, with reformist forces gaining momentum in the polls. At the center of the contest is Natapong Rempanyawut, leader of the Progressive People's Party, who is emerging as the front-runner.
The race is now widely seen as a three-way contest. Natapong's reformist movement is challenging Prime Minister Anutin Charnvirakul and his conservative Bunchai Thai Party as well as the former ruling Pheu Thai Party. A poll conducted by Swan Dusit University shows Natapong leading with over 35% support, followed by Pheu's Thai Prime Ministerial candidate Yochanan Wongsawat, while Anutin trails in third place with 16%. A separate survey by the National Institute of Development Administration also places Natapong ahead with support rising to 29%, up from 25% earlier this month. The same poll shows Anutin making modest gains to 22%, though he remains behind his main rivals. The People's Party is the successor to the Move Forward Party, which won the 2023 election but was blocked from forming a government and later dissolved by a court ruling. As polling day draws closer, pressure is building on Anutin to shore up conservative support, with coalition talks widely expected after the vote.
Indonesia is promising greater market transparency and stronger corporate governance after a sharp sell-off wiped around $80 billion of local stocks. Chief Economic Minister Airlangga Hartarto says authorities are committed to reform, while insisting the country's economic fundamentals remain strong. Proposed changes include raising the minimum free float of shares to 15%, letting pension and insurance funds invest more, and scrutinizing small shareholders more closely. The sell-off came after index provider MSCI warned about ownership and trading transparency, saying Indonesia could be downgraded to frontier market status. The Jakarta Composite Index fell more than 8% over 2 days, its steepest drop since April. The head of the Indonesia Stock Exchange, Imar Rachman, resigned on Friday, taking responsibility for the turmoil. Investor confidence has also been hit by concerns over President Prabowo Subianto's expansionary fiscal policies and a greater state role in financial markets. Confidence was further shaken by the appointment of the president's nephew, Thomas G. Wandono, to the central bank earlier this month. The rupiah also fell to a record low of 17,000 against the US dollar last week and has remained weak since. Israel announces plans to reopen the Rafah border crossing on Sunday, restoring limited travel between Gaza and Egypt after months of closure. Under the arrangement, only Gaza residents who leave during the war are allowed to return from Egypt. Entry will require coordination with Egyptian authorities, along with prior Israeli security clearance. Rafah is Gaza's main gateway to the outside world, serving a population of more than 2 million people. Its prolonged closure has left residents with severely restricted access beyond the territory. Israeli forces took control of the crossing in May 2024, further tightening movement at the southern border. The reopening is a key condition in the first phase of a US-backed initiative aimed at halting the fighting between Israel and Hamas following a ceasefire agreement reached in October. Israel had previously linked the move to the recovery of the body of the last Israeli hostage held in Gaza, which it said was recovered earlier this week. As Washington and Beijing compete for technological leadership, the battle is moving beyond politics and into the factory floor. From Chengdu, Farhana Sheh takes us inside one of China's most advanced smart factories.
As the US-China tech rivalry intensifies, the front line isn't just in the South China Sea, it's on the factory floors in Chengdu. The city, traditionally famous for giant pandas and laid-back lifestyle, today is the beating heart of China's new quality productive forces. Behind me is the Geely manufacturing hub, where the transition from made in China to intelligently made in China is in full force.
Beijing's push for new quality productive forces prioritizes high-end AI-driven efficiency over sheer scale. Inside this 5G-enabled facility, the welding shop is almost entirely automated, with more than 600 robots producing a new electric vehicle every single minute. Sustainability is central too. This is a fully zero-carbon factory, powered entirely by renewable energy, with 90,000 square meters of solar panels on the roof. And it's not just about China. Partnerships with companies like Malaysia's Proton means that technology and sustainability standards are spreading across the region, bringing innovation closer to ASEAN markets. In the race between the US and China for technological dominance, these factory floors show how the competition is moving from diplomacy to production.
As Malaysia and the global south navigate the crossfire of tariffs and tech bans, the factories here in Chengdu offer a clear message. China is not just reacting to global pressure, it is building a parallel technology reality. The question for the international community is no longer if they can compete, but whether we can afford to be left out of the systems being built here today. I'm Farhana Sheh, reporting from Chengdu, China for AWANI International.
That concludes AWANI International for tonight. Stay with us as we track the strategies and power shifts shaping the new global order. For more updates, visit international.astroawani.com and follow us on social media. I'm Faye Kwan. Thank you for watching and good night.